the Baron posted, "Colored property will be raised on her door." But one midnight duet lit the rails. Midnight smothered Dustwell in velvet dust when a hiss of kerosene broke the stillness. From her saloon's shadowed balcony, Ruby Mae Songbird Carter watched men in brass-button coats douse the lone cattle transfer post at the town edge. The torches belonged to Silas Finch, rail baron extraordinaire, his silver waistcoat gleaming hellfire orange as flames bit into timber. "Track cuts west at sunrise," Finch drawled, planting a survey stake where the post office once stood. "Whoever's still standing on this sand come next full moon answers to steel." His eyes flicked toward Ruby's signboard Songbird Saloon, and he smiled like a man measuring coffins. Ruby's knuckles whitened on the railing. Her saloon was her mother's legacy, her only sovereign ground in a town that still priced a skin. Now the rail line would carve straight through its mahogany stage. Below, ash swirled hot enough to brand the sky. She tasted iron fear and something sharper. A single, low requinto chord floated from the alley. Diego Torito Torres stepped from the gloom poncho brushing soot thumb, coaxing a rebel note from cedar strings. "Senora," he murmured, gaze never leaving the blaze fire eats quiet hearts first. "Maybe we make music loud enough to drown it." Ruby met his amber stare, the flames reflected like twin suns. Somewhere inside the crackle, a daring idea flared wild, rhythmic, unstoppable. If Finch wanted steel, she would answer with song, strong enough to melt it. Ruby's saloon woke at high noon shutters, flung wide to let prairie light spill across polished brass lamps, and a stage no wider than a cattle door. Dustwell's ranch hands shuffled in first pockets, jangling faces already pink from sun and cheap rye. Ruby Mae Carter stood behind the walnut bar cinnamon silk dress, hugging a figure carved by long nights and longer expectations. She wore her trademark red feather and a smart felt hat smile fixed like a bright note held just a shade too long. Boys she greeted pouring shots with practiced flair. Remember, a real gentleman tips before he sips. They laughed, half out of respect, half from a need, not to anger the only woman who could ban them from their nightly comfort. Yet Ruby's eyes kept sliding to the corner table where Sheriff Raleigh sat in Finch's pay ledger open tapping a quill. Back tax tally $80 due by Friday. If she missed payment, Finch's railroad company would claim the property as forfeit to Progress. The sheriff winked as though the math were personal, and Ruby's smile strained. A sudden hush swept the room when a tall vaquero stepped through swinging doors, poncho-dusted road-gray, wide-brimmed sombrero shading amber eyes. His left hand rested on a beat-up requinto guitar. His right bore faint rope scars. Diego Torito Torres surveyed the saloon like a man measuring the distance between past and future, then offered a half-bow to Ruby. "Senora Songbird," he said, accent rolling soft as mesquite smoke. "Thirst and a tune for hire whichever you wish first." The ranch hands chuckled, eager for novelty. Ruby raised a brow. "Stages for regulars, stranger." "Ale's a nickel." Diego's lips curved. He placed a silver coin on the counter, too shiny for ordinary wages, and swung onto the stage without waiting for leave. Fingers found the strings. A slow, haunting son, Chorocho, filled the room, notes skipping like stones across water. Conversation died. Even Sheriff Raleigh paused mid-tally. Ruby felt each measure vibrate inside her ribs, the melody strangely twin to a slave spiritual her mother once hummed on sleepless nights. Diego locked eyes with her midriff, coaxing a brighter chord. Challenge and invitation braided inside the music. Against every business instinct, Ruby set her tray aside, stepped onto the boards, and sang a contralto answer, low, smoky, defiant. The blend was lightning Mexican syncopation under black gospel hum percussion from boots stomping dusty planks. Men forgot their beer. Two women at the back clasped hands swaying. The sheriff's quill stilled. When the final harmonic, faded saloon air felt cleaner, as though wind had swept through. Applause thundered. Ruby's cheeks flushed half triumph, half alarm at how easily she'd surrendered her guard. She slipped behind the bar before anyone saw her hands trembling. Diego followed, leaning his guitar against the counter. "Didn't mean trouble," he said quietly. "Just needed the world to hear a different kind of fire." Ruby poured him a shot of rye on the house. "That song nearly bought me a shutdown, senor. Finch's men don't like surprises." "Finch." Diego's jaw tightened, a shadow crossing his gaze. "He stole more than surprises from me down by the Pecos line." Ruby's curiosity flared, but she recapped the bottle. "I run a business, not a war." Diego tipped his glass. "Sometimes a song is the sharpest weapon." Before she could retort, the doors burst inward. Two of Finch's foremen stomped across the room, soot from last night's torching still smudging their collars. "Heard music," the larger one sneered. "Sounded like a colored girl mating a coyote." Laughter scraped nerves raw. Ruby stepped forward. Saloon rules forbid brawls before sundown, but Diego was faster. He slid between her and the foreman, requinto slung across his back like a shield. "This coyote bites," he said in flawless English voice, soft but edged. A tense second stretched. The foreman measured his lean frame, the casual spread of booted feet. Then Sheriff Raleigh coughed deliberately, closing his ledger with a snap. "Finch, don't pay me to mop up blood tonight," he drawled. "Let's go, boys." They spat on the floor but followed him out. Ruby exhaled shakily. "You just painted a target the size of Texas on your poncho." "I've carried bigger," Diego murmured. He drew a thin roll of parchment from his saddlebag track schematics, stamped with Finch's seal fluttering like a guilty flag. "He plans to run steel straight through your saloon, senora. But I know how to make crowds listen louder than rail hammers." Ruby met his amber eyes, the hum of their duet still buzzing at the edges of her pulse. "You got 3 days before his stakes go permanent." "Show me a miracle." Diego's grin returned small and certain. "Then we start tonight, one rhythm, 2 stubborn hearts, and all the sand in Dustwell to dance on." Outside, a hot wind kicked scattering ash from the burned cattle post across Main Street like black snow. Inside, the saloon's lamps glowed brighter, as if sensing the stage lights of a far bigger show beginning to rise. Ruby locked the saloon doors after sunset and hid the key beneath the whiskey crate. Outside, Dustwell's boardwalk carried scents of mesquite smoke and desperation. Inside, she and Diego unrolled the parchment he'd stolen, its creases glowing in lamplight. Stamped at the top, "Dustwell Diversion. Railway eminent domain. Effective 10 days. Silver stakes marked a line cleaving Main Street in 2, the X of the proposed depot planted directly atop the Songbird saloon. 10 days, not 3, Ruby muttered, pulse skittering. Finch isn't wasting breath. Diego tapped the signature block. "See the clause, citizens may contest if they raise $800 for a counter-survey and submit 500 signatures. Bureaucracy can stall even a locomotive. $800 might as well be moonlight." Ruby folded the map, steeling herself. "And 500 names. Some folks here still cross the street when I pass." Diego's smile surfaced. "Then we give them a reason to cross back." They began at the brick courthouse, where Marigold Jameson kept the town treasury under lock ledger and lace gloves. The banker's daughter looked like spun, sugar-powdered cheeks periwinkle gown, but Ruby knew steel hid beneath the ribbons. In Jameson's oak-paneled office, sunlight struck a brass money box beside neat stacks of telegraph forms. 800 buys the petition, Marigold said, adjusting her pince-nez. 500 signatures files it. Both by noon, 7th day. Fail, and Mr. Finch's writ proceeds uncontested. Ruby's throat tightened. That money protects every shop in Dustwell, including Finch's chosen depot. "I'm aware." Marigold leaned closer, voice dropping. "And for what it's worth, I'd rather hear your contralto at supper than a locomotive whistle. Prove the town agrees, and I'll stand witness." Outside, Ruby exhaled. She's on the fence. "Steel tips fences," Diego said. "Music tips hearts." Their next stop was the adobe mission. Rough pine pews filled the nave. Candles flickered beneath an iron crucifix. Padre Luis Ortega greeted them, cassock dusted with chalk and sawdust. "I heard your duet rattled the saloon rafters," he said, eyes lively. "Show me." Ruby hesitated. Diego unslung his guitar, picked out the opening of the Son Jarocho. Ruby's voice hushed, for holy walls wove through his chords. The church absorbed the sound, sending faint echoes into candlelight. Padre Luis nodded satisfaction, blooming. "Follow me." He led them to a trap door behind the altar. Down a ladder lay a cool earth cellar lined with casks. Built by Jesuit hands, acoustics like a sea cave, the priest said. Raise lanterns, hang canvas drops, and you have an underground theater. Dustwell's first opera pit. Ruby brushed damp clay. A hidden stage. A sanctuary, Padre Luis corrected. Finch cannot burn what he cannot see until it's too late for him. Diego's grin flashed. Rhythm under the streets? The town will flock. Ruby touched the priest's sleeve. "Will you risk your parish?" "I risk their souls if I stay silent," he replied. At dusk, Ruby and Diego tracked the clang of practice rounds to the abandoned freight yard. There, under a water tower shadow, Fingers Alvarez hammered a rhythm on a dented wash basin revolver resting in his lap. He greeted Diego with a bear hug. "Brother, you still owe me a saddle." Fingers laughed, showing gold incisors. Ruby told him about the hidden cellar and the money they needed. "Easy, Fingers," said, flipping the revolver. "Turn every shot into percussion. A drumbeat folks can't ignore." He fired 3 quick rounds over the basin, ta-ta-tang. Ricochet rang like bronze bells. Ruby flinched. Diego beamed. "Gunfire for harmony?" she asked. "Out here, Senorita Lead keeps tempo," Fingers said. "We'll choreograph safe angles blanks if powder's scarce." Ruby pictured townsfolk filling pews above an underground stage while pistol shots echoed like snare drums. The audacity both thrilled and scared her. Word spread faster than tumbleweed. By the next noon, Ruby found herself standing atop a rain barrel in the market square, Diego on guitar fingers tapping snares against a frying pan. Cotton pickers, seamstresses, blacksmiths paused as Ruby's voice rose, telling the story of a town on the brink of steel wheels that would grind dreams unless Dustwell chose to dance. Between verses, Padre Luis circulated with parchment sheets. Signatures bloomed like desert primrose. Ruby sang until her throat burned, then climbed down to collect the first coin. A young homesteader pressed a nickel into her palm. "For tracks that won't run us over," he said. The nickel joined others in a galvanized bucket. Diego counted aloud in Spanish. Fingers punctuated each dollar with a sizzling rim shot. Even Sheriff Raleigh added a grudging quarter, tipping his hat. That night, Ruby's feet ached, but her heart soared when Fingers announced 313 and climbing. Diego chalked tallies on the saloon wall, every ascending mark a small miracle. He signed his own name, Diego Torres, first on the petition letters firm unhidden. Ruby watched the ink dry, realizing she had never seen him write before. The simple signature was a vow. Outside, torches appeared, the rail foreman again tearing down posters. Ruby strode out, red feather bright in torch glare. "We're within the law," she said. So was the Alamo, the lead foreman sneered. Gunmetal glinted, Diego and Fingers' revolvers angled low. The foreman hesitated, then retreated. Ruby's knees wobbled only after they vanished. Inside, Diego caught her arm. "You stood taller than the barrel tonight." She met his eyes, heat rushing to cheeks. This was only the first verse. He threaded guitar calluses through her fingers, pulse beating beneath her skin. "Then we keep time together." The lanterns burned past midnight as townsfolk trickled in miners' laundresses, even Marigold's bookkeeper. Each left a coin or a name. By dawn, the petition boasted 200 signatures, and the money bucket clinked heavier than hope. Yet Finch's stakes already gleamed beyond the ridge hammered into sunrise. 7 days, Ruby told herself, sipping water to soothe her raw throat. 7 days to teach an entire town the rhythm of rebellion, and to find out whether music could strike harder than steel. Night bled into dusty dawn, before Ruby managed a few hours of uneasy sleep, yet the clang of hammers snapped her awake. She hurried outside to find Silas Finch's crew nailing a fresh placard to the water tower letters, tar black against white. Railway advance 6 days. Property will be cleared without further notice. Under the notice hung a leather satchel inside eviction writs stamped for every storefront on Main. Finch had shaved 4 more days off the deadline. Ruby's heart kicked hard. The bucket in her saloon held barely $313. The petition carried just over 200 names. She felt the earth tilt as though iron wheels already rattled beneath her feet. By late afternoon, the Songbird was empty but for Ruby and Diego. Rain-dark clouds clung to the peaks, promising storms that never broke. Ruby leaned on the bar voice shredded from rally songs, eyes fixed on the tally marks chalked beside the mirror. "Even if we doubled the take, we'd be short," she whispered. "People still fear Finch's payroll more than our music." Diego set his guitar on a stool and poured 2 shots of rye. He didn't drink, only pushed 1 glass toward her, keeping his own fingers knotted. "There's a story I've avoided," he said. "May, light a fire, or burn it all." Ruby met his amber gaze. "Truth can't scorch worse than iron." Diego exhaled. 2 years back, Finch hired Mexicanos for track laying along the Pecos Spur, promised wages land titles. Instead, we slept 5 to a tent, worked 16 hours, paid in scrip redeemable only at his store. I tried to unionize the crew. Finch smashed at Whip's gun butts midnight river drownings. My oldest friend Mateo vanished after I escaped. I still don't know if he's bones beneath a culvert. Pain rippled through his words, raw, unvarnished. Ruby felt it settle under her ribs, heavy as ballast. She tipped back the rye. It burned less than sorrow. "My mama," she answered. Voice-low opened this saloon in Reconstruction days. A colored woman selling bourbon to white cattle barons, scandal enough. Marshall shuddered her twice, called her clientele unsavory. When she died, I swore the Songbird would outlive every badge and ledger. Finch threatens that promise. Lightning flickered far off, casting the mirror in brief silver. Their reflections looked weary, yet defiant. 2 souls weather-cracked but unbroken. Diego reached behind the bar, produced a stone bottle of camp alcohol, high-proof fuel Ruby kept for cleaning lantern chimneys. "Let's test something," he said. He carried the bottle to the hard-packed lot behind the saloon, where the wind had swept the desert floor clean. Fingers Alvarez waited with a tin pail and snare stick's curious grin flashing. Diego poured a narrow ribbon of alcohol in a wide circle, then struck a match. Blue flame raced the outline, tracing a glowing arena in the dusk. "Sand becomes stage," he said, stepping inside the ring. "Play." Fingers found a steady bam, bam, tang revolver rim shot, echoing while Diego's requinto slid into a sinuous 6/8 rhythm. Ruby hesitated at the ring's edge boot's silk dress poise, then closed her eyes and let the contralto rise. The melody from their first duet returned richer fused with desert wind. She spun slowly, skirt-catching ember-light voice climbing above the drum of her pulse. Sparks flared from the sand, tiny meteors caught in updrafts. Neighbors peeked over fences. Children gathered wide-eyed. Flames licked the outline, but left the center cool. Diego's chords urged fingers' percussion cracked like distant gunfire, and Ruby let the song turn fierce lyrics halfway between hymn and war cry, "Steel can take the land, but never the soul that sings." Applause burst when the last note hung. Ruby's chest heaved, sweat glazed her brow, but awe shone in every onlooker's face. Even Sheriff Raleigh, lurking by the hitch post, tugged his brim in reluctant salute. Diego doused the flames with sand. They felt that he said voice hoarse. Ruby nodded, adrenaline buzzing. So did I. But feeling won't print money. Then we scale it. Fingers chimed in, twirling a stick. A full-blown desert dance festival 3 nights from now. Charge 2 bits a head. Make Finch watch a crowd choose melody over mandate. Ruby's mind raced. 3 nights barely time to rehearse, but also too soon for Finch to sabotage through formal writs. The unfinished rail bed already cut a scar outside town. Its broad level stretch could seat half the county if lit with lantern nets. Use his own tracks as our stage, she murmured, idea crystallizing. Forge heat with harmony, show investors. Dustwell beats richer than his freight line. Diego's smile curved equal parts daring and devotion. A song so loud the governor hears. Lightning flashed again nearer. Thunder rolled like distant timpani. Ruby strode to the saloon door and flipped the sign to closed for creation. She grabbed chalk scrawling across the outside wall in sweeping letters. 3 days dance on the tracks, music, flame, freedom, sign and donate inside. A cluster of townsfolk applauded the bold scrawl. Ruby faced them, red feather gleaming in lantern glow. Bring every coin, every name, every voice she called. If Finch wants steel, we'll answer with a rhythm he can't drown. Cheers rose thin at first, then swelling. Somewhere in the crowd, Marigold Jameson smiled, feathered pen poised. Diego slipped beside Ruby fingers, brushing hers. 3 days, he reminded. 3 nights, she corrected, eyes blazing. And a dawn that belongs to Dustwell. Above them, thunder boomed closer, but no rain fell, just the electric promise of a storm waiting to dance to their tune. Wind came howling off the mesa like some hungry god whipping the lanterns strung along the half-built railbed. Ruby had just counted the evening's take, $616, 434 signatures, when the first burning brand arced from the darkness. It struck canvas, and the sail whooshed up like a dry Christmas tree. More torches followed. 2 of Finch's foreman coats, still streaked with soot from the cattle post fire, sprinted down the bank, spilling kerosene as they ran. Flames raced the guy wires, licking the plank runway Ruby and Diego had hammered together only hours ago. "Buckets," Ruby croaked, but the smoke shredded her voice into a whisper. She lunged anyway, yanking a flaring cloth clear of the stage. Heat singed her wrists. Coughing tore something inside her throat. When she tried to shout again, nothing came, only air and pain. Diego vaulted onto the planks, smashed his guitar across a raider's shoulder, then dragged Ruby back as a second board ignited. Fingers Alvarez cracked 2 blanks into the sky, ta-ta, and the foreman scattered, but not before planting fresh stakes in the ballast, each hung with tin placards. Property of Silas Finch, trespass at peril. By the time townsfolk arrived with wash water and wet sheets, the runway was half charred, the lantern net a sagging ruin. Padre Luis's bell clanged over the tumult while miners stomped embers and laundresses smothered sparks. When the last flame hissed out, Ruby surveyed blackened boards and curling cloth throat, raw eyes stinging. Marigold Jameson hurried from the courthouse, cheeks flushed. Bad news. Finch wired the county council votes at dawn. If we miss the fee or signatures, Dustwell's charter dissolves on the spot. How short? Diego asked. $146, 66 names. Ruby swayed, clutching the money bucket hard enough to dent the tin. No voice, no stage, and the town still in arrears. For a heartbeat, she considered yielding, then caught Diego's gaze, fury yes, but faith too, waiting for her cue. She grabbed a stub of chalk, dipped it in warm ash, and scrawled across the blackened rail. Dance tomorrow, track or cinders. I can't sing, but I can stand, will you? Her silent challenge crackled like static through the onlookers. Fingers pounded a rhythm on an overturned barrel. Diego stomped time beside him. One by one, people stepped from the gloom miners, smelling of coal seamstresses with needle-pricked fingers, ranch boys still in spurs, dropping coins into the bucket, adding names to the petition Padre Luis spread on a crate. Sheriff Raleigh strode up last badge, catching torch glare. Wordlessly, he slipped a silver dollar into Ruby's palm and signed with a flourish. Laws on the ledger, he said. Now make it sing. All night, the railbed thrummed like a forge. Miners swung sledges, knocking warped planks loose. Children gathered coal oil cans for new lanterns. Laundresses braided strips of colored cotton improvised foot wraps so dancers could skim the iron without blistering. Padre Luis fetched crimson altar cloths and draped them from telegraph poles' banners snapping like defiant flags. Ruby moved among them, voice gone but hands busy tying knots, guiding harmonies by tapping her chest for pitch. When words failed, she raised a fist. The crowd mirrored the gesture and work resumed harder than before. Just before dawn, Diego chalked final tallies on a surviving board, $801 circled twice, 512 names underlined. Ruby pressed a soot-black thumb against the numbers, then placed her palm over her heart. The crowd answered with a low, communal hum, the warm tremor of a town waking into its own power. They turned to the ruined stage. Diego rapped knuckles on an unburned rail tie. "We don't need planks," he told them. "Iron will do." He and the miners filed the bolt heads, flat sanded the steel with handfuls of dry grit until it gleamed. Sparks leapt under each stroke, preview of the show to come. Ruby slid a foot onto the rail. It was cool now, smooth as onyx. She stepped fully, cotton wraps gripping metal, and traced a slow rhythm with her heel tack, dots of orange glinting in the dim light. Fingers answered with a rim shot. Someone cheered. The rail itself seemed to vibrate with possibility. Above the valley, first light bled pink along the horizon, catching the altar cloths, so they glowed like sunrise banners. Ruby raised both arms. Though no sound came, everyone heard the vow they would meet Finch on these tracks tomorrow night, with beat drums and voices loud enough to shake the rails from under him. Wind tugged at her red feather but couldn't pull it free. Dustwell was ready to dance on iron, and Ruby, silent but unbroken, had never stood taller. Torchlight flickered across the unfinished railbed as night packed tight around Dustwell. Crimson altar cloths whipped in the wind lanterns, one from every porch outlined the steel in molten loops that spelled freedom. Padre Luis stood by the telegraph pole bell ready to toll the downbeat. Fingers, Alvarez twirled his sticks-holstered revolver loaded with blanks for percussion. Miners, ranch wives, and gamblers filled the slope in a living amphitheater. 500 voices rustled like prairie grass waiting for flame or miracle. Silas Finch arrived first. He rode a gleaming chestnut beside a handcar stacked with coal braziers. 10 armed foremen hopped down, shoveling live coals onto the rails until the steel glowed sullen red. Finch's silver waistcoat shone hellish in the forge light. "Dance on that," he sneered, raising the writ of seizure high. Ruby Mae Carter stepped forward, red feather trembling, but unscorched. Her voice was still a rasp, useless for song, but her eyes blazed. Diego Torito Torres joined her requinto, slung low, poncho snapping. He drew a pick across the strings, a single defiant chord that rang like tempered glass. Padre Luis chimed the bell. Fingers answered with ta-ta pistol rim shots, and a hush swept the track. Diego began a fierce zapateado rhythm, boot heels hammering the rail tie just shy of the glowing steel. Sparks flew. The crowd clapped the offbeats. Ruby mouthed the lyrics, no sound escaping, but her body spoke, hips, swaying skirt, swirling ember light. Her silence became drum pulse, every step a syllable. Finch waved his men forward, shotguns raised. Before, lead could fly a piercing contralto slice the dark marigold Jameson perched atop the telegraph mound. She seized Ruby's melody and hurled it skyward. 2 seamstresses joined, then a ranch hand, then the whole slope erupted in rough harmony. Their chorus climbed raw, yet unbreakable. Ruby's head snapped up, tears shining. She lifted her arms as a conductor guiding the human choir she taught in secret cellars. Finch's stallion skittered. Foreman wavered beneath the onslaught of sound. Diego leapt onto the nearest rail, heat shimmering his boots, strummed a blistering solo that braided Mexican sun with gospel blue notes. Sparks crackled under each heel tap, showering fireworks over the iron brand spelling Finch's failure. Fingers fired a blank, straight into the sky. Bam! The beat dropped. Miners slammed hammers on rail spikes. Clang, clang, laundresses snapped wet sheets like cymbals. Children rattled coal cans. The noise became thunder, drowning the hiss of hot steel. Finch tried to shout an order, but the music swallowed him. He dismounted in fury, strode toward Diego, only to be cut off by Sheriff Raleigh, who planted his badge between Finch and the rail. "Towns gathered legal fee and signatures, sir," the sheriff barked, voice booming over the chorus. "Any assault tonight becomes your felony." Marigold waved a leather satchel from her perch. $823 and a petition sealed by every soul here, including mine. She tossed the bag. Padre Luis caught it, holding it like sanctified bread. Finch's face blanched beneath torch glare. He turned to flee, but Ruby stepped onto the glowing track itself, bare feet wrapped in wet cotton strips studded with salt. Steam hissed, yet she stood tall, voice still lost, but message thunder loud. She pointed at Finch, then at the sky, then beat out the final refrain on the rail with her bound heel. "Tuck, tuck, tuck." Sparks soared like comets. The choir hit the last chord and Diego slashed strings in a flamenco flourish. Silence rushed in, deafening. Finch's forfeit echoed in that hush. One by one, his foremen lowered weapons, backing toward their horses. Finch spat into the dust, eyes burning, but the town's roar rose again, cheers, ululations, stamping boots shoving him into retreat. He mounted, wheeled about, and galloped into the dark, the seizure writ fluttering from his hand into the sand. Ruby sagged, feet blistered, throat shredding a silent laugh. Diego caught her before she fell. Padre Luis rang the bell in a rollicking peal. Sparks from the hot rail danced like newborn stars. Sheriff Raleigh lifted the fallen writ and tore it clean in two, handing half to Ruby, half to Diego. "Frame 'em," he grinned. Proof. Steel bends to song. Lanterns dimmed as the crowd flooded the track, stamping cooled iron, humming victory. Marigold slipped the money satchel into Ruby's arms. Fingers pressed a canteen to her lips. She drank, then whispered hoarse but audible Dustwell sings. Diego laid his forehead to hers. "And we just wrote the chorus." Above the railbed altar, cloths cracked in the wind, like crimson sails, guiding a brand-new train, one powered by rhythm, carried by voices, and bound for horizons no baron could buy. Sunrise found Dustwell draped in a hush, unlike any dawn before it, less the tired quiet of ranch hands stretching sore backs, more the rapt pause of witnesses who feared a dream might burst if they breathed too loudly. Yesterday's altar cloths rippled overhead, dyed ruby by first light. Beneath them, the railbed no longer glowed red-hot, but carried a lingering warmth as though music had soaked into the steel itself. Ruby Mae Carter felt that warmth through the bandages swaddling her blistered feet. She stood on the tracks, bare-headed, her red feather now pinned to the iron beam that had carried last night's final spark. Diego Torito Torres limped beside her requinto, cradled like the world's most fragile newborn. Around them, Dustwell's townsfolk picked up lantern frames, hammered nails back into loosened ties, swept ash into tidy mounds. Not debris, Ruby realized evidence. Proof a community had sung itself free. Sheriff Raleigh strolled up, hat in hand. County Council wired a midnight ruling, he announced. Petition acknowledged. Charter secure. Finch's trespass notices void. He offered Ruby half of the torn seizure writ they'd split after the showdown. Souvenir. She tried to thank him, but her voice fractured into air. Raleigh chuckled. "Rest the pipes, Songbird. They saved us once already." He pinned the writ fragment beside her feather, a makeshift crest gleaming against battered iron. Padre Luis joined them, shoulders coated in altar cloth dust. "Choir's asking what comes next," he said. Victory hymn, Sunday Mass on the rails. Before Ruby could gesture, Diego answered. "Next we build seats." "Seats," Luis echoed. "A house big enough to hold what happened here?" Diego said, glancing at Ruby for permission. She nodded, small fierce. 4 walls can't contain it, so we'll raise a roof of sails, a floor of packed sand, call it the Sunrise Opera. Lessons every afternoon, song, dance, guitar, drum. Everyone welcome. Miners nearby cheered. Seamstresses tapped thimbles in applause. Fingers Alvarez spun his sticks overhead. And maybe a real drum kit, not just a pistol and a wash basin, he yelled. Marigold Jameson trotted up ledger under one arm. Town Treasury has an arts fund the council never claimed $50 for civic beautification. She flipped the ledger open at a blank page. Take it plus any donations left in the revolt bucket. Call it seed money. Ruby managed a hoarse chuckle and scribbled a lopsided thank you throat-burning. She pressed her palm to the rail, a silent oath. Then she limped back toward the saloon, Diego matching stride. The Songbird still smelled of smoke and faded rye, but sunlight through the windows painted gold squares on the floorboards. Ruby's mother's portrait oil on cracked canvas watched them from above the back bar. Ruby dragged a stool beneath it and climbed carefully, throat tight. She hung the torn seizure writ fragment beside the portrait, then the railbed feather, a trio of relics, legacy, threat, triumph. Diego screwed a blank plank to the wall below, chalked 4 bold words, House of Second Songs. Seamstress Pearl Carter, Ruby's cousin, slipped in arms full of swatches. Curtains and stage skirts coming, she said. Town's donating bolts faster than I can stitch. Behind her, 2 vaqueros dragged in salvaged pew benches from Padre Luis's chapel cellar. Children followed, balancing chipped lantern glass they planned to mend with syrupy resin. Every arrival turned the saloon into a workshop. Sawdust joined incense of coffee and linseed. Ruby pointed and scribbled, voice too raw for orders, but hands speaking volumes. Diego tuned 3 battered guitars into harmony-teaching chord shapes to eager fingers no older than 10. Near midday, a hush fell when Silas Finch's chestnut clopped down Main Street. Finch wore no waistcoat now, just trail dust, and a revolver that looked heavy on a man stripped of entitlement. He dismounted at the porch's edge, eyes tracking the bustle. No foreman flanked him. Ruby stepped onto the threshold, body braced. Diego rose at her shoulder. Finch removed his hat. Business matter, he said, voice hoarse. He produced a folded parchment, a short-term freight contract. My investors still want a spur. I'll route it north around Dustwell if you'll supply weekly entertainment for the crews. They'll pay for tickets. Silence chilled the saloon. Finch's gaze flicked to Ruby's bandaged throat, then to Diego's bruised knuckles. Steel moves either way, he added quietly. It can haul people same as ore if someone offers them a reason to ride. Ruby took the contract, scanned the figures. The Opera House could stand on ticket revenue alone in 6 months. She glanced at Diego. His amber eyes weighed the offer's danger dependence on the devil, and its promise songs carried far-afield voices too loud to muzzle. She inhaled pain slicing, but a thin note escaped, cracked yet musical. The room stilled. Ruby tapped the rail-writ crest pinned to her lapel, then wrote 3 words on Finch's contract. Not without union. Finch blinked. Diego translated aloud. Dustwell's musicians and stagehands would sign as a cooperative. Wages fixed, schedules humane. No minstrel charades, no color lines. Finch studied Ruby's silent resolve, then exhaled. Done, he said, offering a pen. He signed. Gasps fluttered the room, shock relief, a blossom of applause. Finch tipped his hat to Ruby, then turned and mounted, riding north where survey stakes already glinted. That evening, lanterns rehung over Main Street, not warning beacons now, but invitations. The railbed hosted its first rehearsal under the name Dustwell Free Line Opera. Ruby sat on a crate, voice still ragged, guiding rhythm with claps, while Diego led a bilingual chorus, English verses melting into Spanish refrains stitched by Finger's brand-new snare drum. Padre Luis rang a handbell for modulation. Children jittered like colts. When twilight purpled the horizon, Ruby stood barefoot on the rail again. She tried her voice, soft, tentative, and found a note raw but rising. The crowd hushed. She sang a single line. Steel bends to the song that claims the sunrise. The town echoed it back, and the rail beneath her feet shimmered no longer a threat but a promise, bright, resilient, humming westward. Dustwell had its new path, and Ruby had her second song carried on every wheel that would cross these tracks, ringing with every mile between here and the horizon she now called home. What an ending! Dustwell's iron menace just bowed to one fearless chorus. Can the bonds of song and solidarity truly keep greedy hands at bay? Or is the rail baron simply regrouping smash? Like if Ruby's wordless stand gave you chills, and comment the scene that struck you hardest. Next time, follow an Irish miner who digs too deep, and the young native woman guiding him only to awaken a gray stag spirit hungry for justice. Hit subscribe and ring the bell so you won't miss their haunting trek into the unknown.